What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Next Pats podcast. I'm Phil Perry, very excited to bring you this week's edition of Next Pats. We're talking to the Hall of Famer this week, friends. That's right, Kurt Warner, great friend of Next Pats, back on the podcast this week to talk all things Drake Maye with us. What is the one thing Kurt Warner feels Drake Maye needs to do in order to establish himself as truly worthy of being in the top 10 conversation among quarterbacks in the NFL? Sounds crazy, right? But let me rattle off a few numbers for you here because he's sort of on pace through 3 weeks of the 2025 season. He's second in completion percentage. He's fifth in pass yards. He's tied for seventh in passing touchdowns. He is ninth in passer rating. He's eighth in EPA per play among quarterbacks, and he's fifth in completion percentage over expected. He's played well, aside from the turnovers. Obviously, those need to get cleaned up. But he has shown, despite not having much in the way of talent at that receiver position, that he can still produce. Attacking with his tight ends and with his running backs, this marriage between Josh McDaniels and Drake Maye seems to be working. But what does Kurt Warner think that Drake Maye needs to do in order to take his game to yet another level going into week 4 against the Carolina Panthers? Of course, we're talking about some of our favorites in college football, potential draft picks in 2026. In our Who's Next segment, we're going to be taking some of your mail as well. But first, we have to talk to the guy with the gold jacket. Here's Kurt Warner. All right, there he is, our friend, the Hall of Famer, Kurt Warner. Have to give the intro here because he, of course, is one of the best in the business when it comes to analyzing this game, which he does for NFL Network. And you can watch Kurt on NFL Game Day Kickoff this Sunday at 7 a.m. Eastern on NFL Network ahead of Vikings Steelers. That, of course, is from Dublin at 9:30 a.m. Eastern. And Kurt, I'm looking at the shirt that you're wearing. I just want to throw this out there as well. If you're interested in learning about this game, watch Kurt on his website, qbconfidential.com or YouTube, his study ball videos, just his insight on X, tremendous stuff for anybody looking to just figure out what's going on Sundays when you're sitting there on your couch watching this thing and investing so much time. It's great content, Kurt. So we appreciate you, as always, for sharing some content here on Next Pats.
You got it. My pleasure. I appreciate that. I love breaking down the game. I love teaching the game. You know, I love the fandom. I love that part of it, but there's so much that goes unknown by the fans, and it's easy to point fingers and easy to point the blame. And so, it's fun for me to have this platform and, to be able to kind of teach the game and take people into the mind of a quarterback and the details that matter. And so hopefully we make a few people a little bit smarter as they sit down on Sunday to watch their team play.
Well, let's try to make some people smarter when it comes to the Patriots here, Kurt, and specifically Drake Maye. We talk about him all the time, and it has been fascinating to just track the early portion of his career here, and even through just these first 3 games. A lot going on because, and we rattled it off the top of the show, there's a lot of metrics, a lot of statistics that have him in the top 10 of the league right now, and it's a small sample, it's 3 games, but they are 1-2. And there have been some turnover issues. So when you watch Drake Maye, I guess let's start with the positive. When you watch Drake Maye, your favorite part of his game is what?
Well, I actually think he's done a really nice job of seeing and deciphering things early in the down. Coming into last year, I thought his last year at North Carolina, he struggled a little bit with that, or he was holding the ball a lot, whether it was struggling with that or just the system and situation down there. But I was, that was one thing that I was watching for when he started playing is like, okay, is he going to hold the ball too long? And is the processing going to be a little bit slow? I was more than impressed last year when he played at his ability to see things and get the ball out on time and those sorts of things. I love the way he throws the ball. He's a big, strong guy. But I was actually just tweeting about it the other day is that, man, there is such an art form to being able to throw a firm but soft ball, something that isn't going to knock somebody over, is something that doesn't have to be perfect or you miss. It gives the ability to your wide receiver to make adjustments and attack the football. And I think Drake throws a really, really catchable, soft ball as well. So I think those are a couple of the things that jump out that I've really liked from Drake in his early career.
It's really interesting that you bring that up. Firm, but soft enough. I'm thinking of some of the throws down the seam to the tight ends. The tight ends have been very productive, Hunter Henry in particular. Yeah. It feels like that's that kind of touch that we're seeing from him. He obviously has a big arm, but you very rarely see him completely unleash it and just rip 100-mile-an-hour fastball. He does a pretty good job of putting it on his guys with the velocity necessary, but also making it catchable for them. Kurt, I do wonder, when it comes to Drake, I think one thing that the Patriots have been working on with him has been taking care of the football, and 2 turnovers this past week and a loss to the Steelers. And it does feel like there might be some good and bad to this, but he's got a little bit of a hero ball gene somewhere there in him, extending plays and sometimes getting himself into trouble. But that also can be sort of what leads to special plays at times too. So how would you approach that if you were working with Drake Maye? Do you try to eliminate that part of the game, or do you just try to let him figure it out as he goes? How does he try to maybe limit some of those mistakes while keeping true to who he is?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the one, blessing or burden or whatever you would say is I didn't have to worry about that because, I couldn't move and create. And so I was stuck in one mode. But being stuck in that one mode, I was really good at throwing the football away. I was really good at, salvaging plays and not taking a lot of sacks. And I think that's the give and take that we see in this NFL is we've got so many good athletic quarterbacks that will make a play for you, a play or two for you with their legs every game. But it usually leads to 2 or 3 extra sacks a game as well as they're trying to make that play with their legs. And so, so much of it is that, I know we get wowed by the big run that we see or the creative play that we see, but not often enough do we talk about the big sacks that cost teams because of that. And I don't know how to rectify it. As I said, I never had to juggle that. It's got to be really, really hard, especially when you're probably used to making more plays at the lower levels doing that. And so you've gotten accustomed to making a number of plays a game, with your legs. You get into the NFL and it's a different world. Like you can't think you're going to live in that world. Even like we could look at Monday night, Lamar Jackson, who's the best in the league at doing that. He took a bunch of, a couple bad sacks in that game that I think really hurt the Ravens. And I get it. Like, you're going to have to sacrifice that with a Lamar Jackson because he is so good and dynamic doing that. But guys that aren't Lamar Jackson's level, that aren't going to make as many or as critical of special plays that way, you have to wrestle with the give and take of, is that a good thing or not? Would we rather him throw it away more than, try to make that 8 or 10 yard run every once in a while? When he extends a play. And so that to me is a juggling act. And I don't really know the answer to it, like I said, because I never had to do it. I just know that I watch it every week and it really hurts teams, the number of sacks that some of these guys take. And I think that, led to at least one of the, the fumbles last weekend was, Drake just holding on to the football and trying to create and make a play instead of just, living for another down, that last one in the game where they were set up in great position to be able to possibly win it. But that is a hard one. And I'm not sure how these coaches, I don't want to say coach it out of them because, again, you want the special plays when you know they're going to make a special play. You don't want the negative play when you know it's going to be a negative play, but there's no way to know when that is. And so that wrestling match, I believe, mentally for these quarterbacks has to be really, really tough.
One thing that has been interesting watching Josh McDaniels and the stuff that he has drawn up for Drake Maye, understanding what his skill set is they have used these last couple of weeks, especially, Kurt, more West Coast types of concepts that I would have anticipated seeing from Josh McDaniels, since that's not really his background. We know he's got a ton of volume in terms of the things he was able to call or has been able to call over the course of his career. But I think they've had about 14% of their dropbacks have had some sort of moving pocket element to it. So Drake Maye is able to get out on the edge, whether it's a bootleg or something else. And if there's grass in front of him, he's taken it at times and he's run for some first downs and made some key plays that way. But he's also found some open receivers that way. And he's just so fluid athletically that he's able to make those throws on the move. My question for you is, as somebody who studies so much of these schemes and these systems, Can they do more of that? Because I think it's been about, like I said, 10 or 11 plays over the course of the last 2 weeks when he's had, I think, 70 dropbacks. Would you try to incorporate that a little bit more? Because it does seem like that's something that really suits his strengths.
He does do a nice job, and has a really good feel. And, a lot of those plays are going to be naked bootlegs. And so if you're running the football, which they did really well a couple weeks ago, that play action bootleg stuff is great. Especially in critical moments, you'll see Patrick Mahomes. They'll do that a lot in, third and fourth and short situations and down in the red zone where they get him on the move with kind of a run pass option because he's got such a good feel in those situations. The problem with those plays are you're very limited on the back end with what you're doing. So that's why naked bootlegs are great, because you're hoping to fool, the defense with the run fake. So then you get out on the edge, but the concepts are basically the same, whenever you run a naked bootleg. And then, a lot of people always talk about, well, do more sprint outs and move the pocket. To me, sprint outs are, kind of a, 1 or 2 times a game type thing to kind of change the, the spot, block the defensive line a little bit differently or whatever. But again, when you roll to your right, every route really has to be coming to your right. And so defenses, have gotten pretty good at being able to realize, okay, when you're rolling, these are the 2 or 3 things you're doing. We can sprint that direction and we can really condense the field. And so I don't think it's a thing that you can really major in. Something we did at times when I was playing was kind of like a half roll. So it was a play action, and then we would half roll almost like we were running a naked, and then we would set up, over maybe the front side tackle. So again, creating that semblance of movement, trying to get the linebackers to kind of get out of place, whether it's, with the play fake and then with the movement back, thinking that it's going to be a naked, and then set up and maybe throw a couple things down the field. I just think when we're talking about movement stuff, it really sounds good. And it would be a thing that, I think every team would love to do if it allowed you to have more options on the back end. So it almost has to be more of a fool 'em type play or change up type play than it can be something that you major in, offensively.
Kurt, last thing I wanted to ask you, because I know what a big believer you are in the big play, right? You feel like it's vital. Obviously, you watch some of the best offenses in football. They're not every time they score having to make these 10, 12, 13 play drives down the field. And yet that's what the Patriots have done. It hasn't been all bad for them offensively, but they're in the bottom 10 in the league in terms of the number of plays. They're about 10 plays per scoring drive right now, which again puts them near the bottom of the league. How do you fix that? Is it a Josh McDaniels thing? Is it a scheme thing? Is it a personnel thing, in which maybe you're not going to be able to fix in the middle of the season? When you look at that, what's the best way to tweak that so that maybe you are creating some more explosives?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that it's really hard to make 10 and 12 play drives consistently and score. That usually catches up to you, and all it takes is one mistake in those situations, and now you're behind the sticks and you can't make up for that. But I think a key has to be, okay, figuring out what that means for you. So, I'll give you a couple examples. When I was with the Greatest Show on Turf, we could throw it down the field. Like, we were as good as anybody in the league at the big plays down the field. The big score touchdowns that were the 40-plus yard plays. And so every week we designed a number of shot plays in our offense. We even have had a number of plays that may not have been shot plays, but always had a high or a deep element to it because we knew that was a possibility for us. And so it can start there, and you go, okay, we're really good, or maybe this is we've got 2 or 3 guys that can get down the field. And so instead of being maybe a more ball controlled and trying to get chunk plays, we've got to design 5 or 6 of those shot plays every game and try to get those guys deep, because everything else is going to be more in the short game and ball controlled. And then, when I was in Arizona, we were also really good offense, and we could make big plays, but our big plays with the Cardinals were more in that 20 to 25 yard range. We didn't have anybody that could really stretch the field and take the top off the defense, so to speak. And so we didn't design as many shot plays, but we had a lot of chunk plays designed in our offense, ways to get, Larry and Anquan in that second level And so, again, a difference-making play for a drive is a 20-plus yard play. So we were really good at that aspect of thing, and that became more of the build of our playbook every week was less shot plays. We had our shot plays, and we would try to get them, but we had a majority that would be chunk-type plays because I threw it really well, and we did it really well. And so I think that's what you have to ask yourself as an offense coordinator is, do we have the consistent guys and route running guys and those playmakers, for the deep shots, or are we more, the mid-range types thing? And we've got to get more chunk throws in our offense. Like I look at the Chiefs now, a modern day example is, they don't have consistency at wide receiver. So a lot of their offense is dink and dunk and have to be long drives. And they have to take shot plays with the guys that they have now because they're not consistent route runners, big playmakers in the chunk area. So they have to live and die by the short pass and then the deep shots. And they've got to, find a way to get more of those deep shots. So that's just a modern day example of, I think a team that doesn't have that kind of mid-range, intermediate chunk play offense. It's either short or deep. And I think, Josh will do a great job of figuring out what that is.
Kurt, you said off the top, you hoped that you were teaching the people a few things about this game. I know I just learned something there. The shot versus the chunk. I had never heard that described before, but it makes a ton of sense, and the Patriots are going to have to figure out which team they are because I don't think they can necessarily survive and have a competent and contending type of offense without either one of those, which they really, I don't think they're in either category just yet. Kurt Warner, you are the best. Thank you so much for being with us and sharing all of your insight. Guys, make sure you're following Kurt on X at Kurt13 Warner. Watch him on NFL Network this weekend. Thanks again, my friend. You were awesome.
You got it. We'll catch up again and maybe down the road, and we'll see where this offense is in 10 or 12 weeks.
Sounds great. Thanks, Kurt. Great stuff there from Kurt Warner. As always, coming up here on Next Pats, we're talking who's next, potential draft picks in 2026. How about a receiver out of the Ohio State University? We're also taking your mail, talking about Ramondre Stevenson. What should Mike Vrabel be doing with his running back? It's all coming up next here on Next Pats. Welcome back to the Next Pats podcast. It's time for us to discuss who's next. Of course, it's never too early for a little bit of draft talk, and that's what we're giving you here. We have 3 players that we want to identify as potential early round draft picks for your New England Patriots moving forward. And every single week, it feels like we have a receiver for you, and that's where we're starting the conversation today. We're talking Carnell Tate out of Ohio State University, 6'3", 195 pounds. And the first word I would use to describe Tate's game is smooth. He might not be the fastest player at his position in this year's draft, but when it comes to his ability to run routes, and they're teaching these guys to run routes at The Ohio State University, it feels like the other wide receiver when you're talking great receivers coming out of college, you start with LSU. Very next on the list might be Ohio State, given what they've been able to produce in recent seasons especially. But Tate is smooth, and he knows what he's doing out there, and he has tremendous body control for someone with his frame, which allows him to make contested catches. You can go back even through his highlights from this year, and you're going to see contested catches deep down the field in critical situations. Had a beautiful touchdown catch where he beat Jalen Gilbo, who's a defensive back out of Texas, has played on the inside. Now they have him playing on the outside, but somebody who I think has a future in the NFL, and Carnell Tate is going down the field and is out-jumping him and using great hand strength and really excellent coordination to be able to reel in a touchdown grab. His first big game this season was really his 5 catches for 101 yards and a score against Ohio last week, so not the greatest competition in the world, but he did have that score against Texas, and let's see how he performs moving forward here in the Big Ten. But he is somebody who could live on the outside. He'll block because I've seen him do it. I've seen him block an edge defender. I've seen him go dig out safeties. Mike Vrabel likes that kind of guy. Mike Vrabel likes his Ohio State guys too, you would assume. Being an Ohio State product himself, Carnell Tate is a name we have to keep an eye on in the first or second round for New England. Let's move over to the running back position now. Obviously, a little bit of shakeup after what happened this past week in New England at that position. So could they be looking for their workhorse back of the future in the draft? Guy that we should be talking about, let's stay in the Big Ten, and let's stay with Ohio State's greatest rival. We'll go to Michigan, and we'll talk about Justice Haynes. 5'11", 210 pounds, your classic early down runner. Now, he transferred from Alabama, where he wasn't getting quite the workload that he anticipated or wanted. But he had 79 carries for Alabama, 448 yards, and 7 touchdowns in 2024. Not bad. Now he's going to get the opportunity to be the guy for the Maize and Blue, and he started out guns a-blazing through 4 games, 537 yards, 8.1 yards per carry, and 6 touchdowns. He had 149 yards on 17 carries in a win over Nebraska, and he looks like the kind of tackle-breaking machine that would fit in nicely with the type of offense that both head coach Mike Vrabel and offensive coordinator Josh McDaniels want. McDaniels wants to get downhill. He wants to be able to run those inside zone, those duo plays where you're getting those double teams at the line of scrimmage. You're working your way up to the linebackers. You need guys who can handle that physically, and that looks like Justice Haynes. So, should the Patriots be interested in the first round at running back? Probably not. But would you double dip after going in the second round with Travion Henderson? You know he might not be that workhorse type. He's an explosive playmaker. He's a passing game type. So would you double dip and on day 2 grab another running back to hit you on early downs? That might not be the worst idea in the world. And if they decide to do it, Justice Haynes, a pretty good option. Now, speaking of the run game, our third player in our Who's Next segment is maybe the best run-blocking offensive lineman in the country. We're talking Spencer Fano from Utah, 6'6", 308 pounds. So not the biggest human on the planet, especially at that position. But this guy is twitchy, he is powerful, he is explosive, and he is violent, especially when you're handing it to a back who happens to be running behind him. If the Patriots want a true right tackle to pair opposite Will Campbell at left tackle, and things have been going fairly well for Will Campbell at left tackle. Yes, it's early, but if they want to keep him there, it looks like they could be able to do that given what they've seen from him thus far. And if they're looking for somebody on the right side, and you want somebody on that right side who can maintain that traditional right tackle role, which always feels like that's your run blocking side. That's the big body you want to get behind on first and second down. Spencer Fano might have to be their first round pick. He is that gifted. He is that talented. He started at left tackle as a true freshman for Utah, went to right tackle last year, and no big deal, was an All-American. Is he the pass protector that you're dying for, whether you end up playing him at left tackle or right tackle? Maybe not yet. He might need a little refinement. And again, his frame at 308 pounds might be a little lighter than what some teams are looking for. But when you get a physical specimen like this and you have the opportunity to draft one and you might have a long-term opening at that right tackle spot, listen, we don't know how much longer 34-year-old Morgan Moses is planning on playing. This might be the best option for the Patriots to choose somewhere in the middle of the first round. All right, you know what time it is. It's time to get into your mail. We're going to start with a question on Ramondre Stevenson. It's been on everybody's mind this week. Paul Gold wants to know, is it time to cut Stevenson? No, Paul, I would say it's not. Number one, you really have 3 running backs in your room right now, and if you just decide to up and release Ramondre Stevenson and pare that group down to 2, well, now if you have an injury at the position, now you're really up a creek. No question about it long term, but certainly in the short term, if that were to happen, for instance, on the first drive against the Carolina Panthers, not what you're looking for. So what should you do with Ramondre Stevenson? I had the opportunity to ask Mike Vrabel exactly that earlier this week in terms of how he might try to strike that balance between showing belief in his players, which is something he clearly has wanted to do, i.e. Andy Borregales getting a game ball after week 2 when he missed 2 PATs and had a penalty on a kickoff, but also wanting to make sure that he's holding his team and his players, and more specifically his best players, accountable for their actions on the field. Nobody dislikes Ramondre Stevenson's effort. Nobody questions his commitment to the team. But to fumble twice in a 1-score game and for your team to lose, to come back the next week and really not have any sort of repercussions, to me, would be surprising from Mike Vrabel. I think he hinted at the fact that we'll see less Ramondre Stevenson on Sunday against Carolina, but here is our back and forth from earlier this week.
Mike, you mentioned last night how you guys are going to need Ramondre this season. How do you balance holding someone accountable and valuing the message that might send to your team versus making sure you still have a guy on board, in rhythm, etc., when you do feel like you need him down the line?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to need him. We're going to need everybody. And he's got talent, skill set. He's a good protector. We trust him in protection. And, we'll get through this. And I think a lot of it is just the consistency and continuing to build confidence. But you have to go out there and do it. How I manage that from an accountability standpoint, I would say as of now, I don't know what that'll look like later on the week as far as how we distribute the reps.
Rep distribution. How should it be handled? Here's my opinion. When it comes to Antonio Gibson and Ramondre Stevenson, you have two quote-unquote big backs. I know Travion Henderson was drafted in the second round. We've covered him extensively here on this podcast. We understand what his high-end ability could mean for the Patriots offense moving forward. But is he a true every-down back? I don't think he is, especially not yet, given some issues that we've seen from him with vision as a true tailback and in pass protection. So to me, more Travion Henderson, not necessarily the answer for right now. I know Antonio Gibson fumbled last week, and I know he's had fumble issues in the past himself. But he hasn't had 9 fumbles over the course of the last 2 seasons the way Ramondre Stevenson has. And to me, last year, Antonio Gibson was their better running back. So what I would do is keep Ramondre Stevenson not only on the team, but I would keep him in uniform. I would bench him, though. I would demote him, is maybe even the more accurate word. And I would make Antonio Gibson your starting running back on first and second down. Keep Travion Henderson in that passing down sort of role, and then flip the responsibilities. Antonio Gibson has essentially been spelling Ramondre Stevenson. He's averaging about 5 touches per game. It's not a whole heck of a lot. That's what I would give to Ramondre Stevenson in Week 4 against the Panthers. Meanwhile, Antonio Gibson would be up closer to about 10 touches in this upcoming game because that's essentially where Ramondre Stevenson has been. I would flip-flop those roles, make Antonio Gibson your starter, send that message to the locker room that no matter how talented we think you are, if you perform in a certain kind of way, your starting gig is on the line. To me, that is one way of holding your players accountable, sending a message, and yet still having the ability to have a representative product on the field on Sunday. Next piece of mail here is from John K., who asks, when will we see Williams, that means Kyle Williams, given quality reps? This team needs a vertical field stretcher. I agree with you, John. They need to get vertical more frequently, create a little bit more separation, especially down the field. Kyle Williams has just 2 catches on 2 targets for 20 yards this season. The Patriots, just to give you an idea of how they're operating offensively, Drake Maye has attempted just 7 passes of 20 air yards or more. So throws that are traveling at least 20 yards beyond the line of scrimmage. Just 7. He's 4 for 7. But that 6.6 deep pass attempt rate ranks him near the bottom of the league, 29th out of 32 qualifiers. Is that because Drake Maye can't do it? Does he not have the arm strength? Is Josh McDaniels scared to let him push the football deep? I don't think so. I think it could be in part due to the coaching staff wanting to make things simple for Drake Maye to a degree. And so you're seeing a lot of targets to their tight ends, a lot of targets to their running backs, and you are not seeing a whole lot in the way of production from their wide receivers. Their leading receiver this year in terms of receiving yardage at that specific wide receiver position is Kayshon Boutte with 147. He ranks 45th in the league in receiving yards and 35th specifically among wideouts. That ain't great. You want to go even further into how this receiver unit is performing to this point this season? And again, let's keep in mind those numbers we rattled off the top of the show where Drake Maye is in the top 10 in a number of categories. It's borderline miraculous, friends, that he's at that level of production with receivers who have done so little. You want to look at Next Gen's separation metric? The Patriots have 1 receiver in the top 50 in the NFL when it comes to average separation. And it's actually Pop Douglas, who has 5 catches for 13 yards. No one else is getting open on a consistent basis. Steph Diggs is catching everything they throw to him. But those catches are typically with defenders right on top of him, which inherently make those throws a little bit more difficult. So what can they do? To me, Kyle Williams isn't a bad option. Here's what the third-round rookie out of Washington State told me when I asked him if he felt there was anything more he could be doing to make sure that he's getting more opportunity on the field. He said, quote, "I feel like I can do everything, especially what's asked of me. I feel like I'm pretty versatile. I feel like it's just at this point, it's just waiting my turn. We have a lot of guys ahead of me that are capable of doing everything just as well, and they all have great traits to their game that benefit this offense. For me, it's just we have a lot of vets in front of me, and I'm just a rook. Right now, I'm just waiting my turn." There's a lot more detail on a story that I wrote about Kyle Williams. It's on NBCSportsBoston.com right now. You get some insight into how he's preparing and his overall mindset as he's going through the early stages of his rookie year. He's not panicking. He's continuing to do everything that he can. That's what he explained to me in order to get on the field as quickly as humanly possible, but he's just not there yet. Will that happen against Carolina? I think they should try it a little bit more and see if he can give you that dynamic factor that you're missing in that receiver group right now. All right, that's it for this edition of the Next Pats podcast. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for watching, dear friends. Thanks so much to Kurt Warner, the Hall of Famer, for sharing his insight with us here on Next Pats. We always appreciate being able to get the Hall of Famer on board. Lots of interest there in Drake Maye around the league right now, given how he's performed through the first 3 weeks of this season. We'll be right back here next week talking more about what's next for your New England Patriots as they get ready for a Sunday night showdown with the Buffalo Bills. Divisional matchup. Big time Next Pats episode coming at you next week. We'll be right back here on Friday. We'll see you then.